Hi, everyone. Can everyone hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you, Siobhan.
Perfect. Okay, so I suppose we'll go ahead and get started. So, welcome everyone to our What We Can Do Feminist Climate Justice panel discussion for the Gender Equality Forum today. I'm Siobhan Doyle and I'm going to be chairing this event. I'm also a member of the National Women's Council Youth Advisory Panel, which I'll speak about shortly. I just graduated from University College Dublin with a degree in sustainability. And when I was there, I helped to set up the UCD Sustainability Society. And I also got involved in the National Women's Council Youth Advisory Panel. So on to today's topic. Youth participation has been recognized as fundamental in order to fulfill our obligations under United Nations conventions and to deliver on our commitments, our government commitments. And over the last decade, we've witnessed a new generation of young feminists rising up. They're different in that they've grown up in the age of technological advancement and in a more liberal context, which gives us a different outlook and approach to feminist and social justice and activist organizing than the campaigners before us. So, young women have shown vibrant activity across social media platforms, and we've seen a large number of young activists be the driving force across many progressive movements, including marriage equality, Me Too, Black Lives Matter, for the Future. And young women have really been at the forefront of advocating for climate justice that's fast and fair. So if you have any questions, if you can input them into the chat box and we'll come to them at the end of the session. So we have a great schedule for this afternoon. If we have it on the next slide. So our first speaker is going to be Colette McEntee from the Feminist Communities for Climate Justice. And here, yeah, there we go. So that's a collaboration between the National Women's Council and Community Work Ireland. And then we're going to have a panel, which I'll be chairing with Belle Nabuli from Irish Second Level Students' Union, Kelsey Doyle from Belong To, Claire Kenny from Independent Living Movement Ireland, and then we're going to have our Q&A. So just briefly about the National Women's Council and the YAP. So the National Women's Council is the leading representative organisation within Ireland for women's groups, women's rights groups. So we've over 180 member groups across the whole island. We're a movement building organisation rooted in our membership. So as I said, we work across the whole island, and they're also part of the international movement to protect and advance women's and girls' rights. So the purpose is to lead action for the achievement of women's and girls' equality through mobilizing, influencing, and building solidarity. And several organizations have begun establishing youth advisory panels, so a YAP, to ensure young people are heard and represented in the work that they do, and that they too have a chance to influence change. It's important to learn from the experience of youth climate movements and how they organize and build for change. Discourse is changing, and young people involved need resources, but also wants autonomy to maintain control over how they self-organize and to agree with their own tactics and strategies. So young women play a key role in the movement for women's rights and in shaping our feminist future. And the members of the National Women's Council here in Ireland recognise this and wanted to increase the participation and representation of young women in their work. And in 2023, young women from across our member groups were invited to join the youth advisory panel in order to amplify our voices and ensure their voices and experiences inform the organization's advocacy and campaigns. And we strongly encourage young women, particularly those from diverse backgrounds and underrepresented groups, including ethnic minority groups and disabled people, to join us. So for more information, about the National Women's Council of Ireland, you can go to www.nwci.ie, and I see Colette has a link there in the chat. So I'm going to hand you over to Colette now, our first contributor and keynote speaker.
Hello everyone, it's great to be here today. I am Colette McEntee, Project Coordinator of the Feminist Communities for Climate Justice project. The project itself is a joint between the National Women's Council and Community Work Ireland, which are both national representative organisations in Ireland. The National Women's Council, as Siobhan explained, represents women and feminist groups throughout the country, and this also includes Community Work Ireland. And then Community Work Ireland themselves represent community workers, groups and development organisations throughout the island as well. And then the Feminist Communities Project is funded under the Strand 2 of the Department of Environment, Climate and Communications Community Climate Action Programme. And we're in a list and in great company of many other projects funded under the same stream. So find out about the project at the link I'm just about to pop into the chat there. So there you go. So just the next slide there, please. So at the project's core is feminist climate justice. Climate justice means that while we're reducing our carbon emissions, we are also reducing social inequalities, creating a far fairer and more just world in the process. Climate justice recognises that the effects of climate breakdown are not felt equally. And then feminist climate justice pays attention to the gendered and intersectional characteristics of climate justice. So noting the impacts on gender, abilities, disabilities, race, ethnicity, and so on when we're discussing all aspects of climate change and climate justice. And you'll see there a quote, "Those that cause the least of the climate crisis are the most affected with the least resources to respond." And that's a good way to sum up climate justice. So the project itself has various elements. The project's about amplifying the voices of women, girls, and marginalised communities most impacted by the climate crisis in Ireland, but while taking lots of guidance and I suppose techniques and tools from further afield as well, beyond the island itself. The project advocates with women and girls and marginalised communities as active partners of the just transition, and we're influencing and engaging with policy on national and local and at EU level on climate justice that reflects feminist and gendered community work values. The project's mobilising communities, and we're doing that through the establishment of our Feminist Communities for Climate Justice National Network, and I'll pop a link to that into the chat in a wee bit, because you're all very welcome to join it. It's for Ireland-based communities and individuals, but it's also, again, people beyond the island itself. And within that, we have working groups, and we have working groups on local food, policy and advocacy, arts and creative approaches to feminist climate justice. And we're open to creating more as well. And then we also have just completed training, a certificate programme that was directed at community and youth workers and communities to respond to climate impacts within their communities. And that was through the delivery of the Community Work and a Change in Ireland certificate programme, which we did in collaboration with the Department of Applied Social Studies at Maynooth University here in Ireland. And we also are going to be creating toolkits for communities and community workers in the face of the climate crisis. So those materials will be available on our website, and yeah, we'd love if people will utilise them throughout the country and beyond as well. So why this project? Just to give you a bit of a context, it really came about as a response to community and youth workers on the ground who can see the impacts of the climate crisis on the communities that they live and work in, and that they wanted to strengthen their capacity and their confidence in communicating those challenges and responding to them as well. And so a need for more information and guidance and tools. And so this is really what this project is all about, in trying to fill that gap. We're also responding to huge data and policy gaps across the board. Existing climate policy does not pay attention to the gendered impacts of the climate crisis. So in an Ireland context, there is a huge domestic gendered gap in the policy or climate adjacent policy. And so we're trying to close that. And then we're trying to create, and we are, slowly but surely creating a feminist analysis of climate justice and influencing policymakers on all levels as well. And it's a response to the National Women's Council members. So the National Women's Council is a membership structure, and that is where the Youth Advisory Panel, of which Siobhan and some of our other panelists are members, it really takes from what the membership called for. And so they wanted a climate justice, a feminist climate justice approach integrated into the council's work. And so this is a response to that as well. So why women? Why are we examining and paying attention to gender? The climate crisis and its impacts are worsening existing forms of inequality, and there are many dimensions to gender inequality in Ireland and beyond today. So women of all ages and in all their diversity have lower incomes and less wealth compared to men, with a gender pay gap, gender pension gap, and women doing twice as much unpaid care work. In the EU just last year, men were paid on average 12.7% more than women. Caring roles are directly linked to how women use their transport, make choices about food and energy use, and also their financial security and food security, and much more. Research shows that most Irish women here in Ireland consider car ownership a necessity to carrying out caring duties and to alleviate concerns regarding safety and also reliability when they're using public transport. And care work is also key to how women experience and are impacted by the climate crisis due to all of these factors. So just on to the next slide. Yeah, so women are more likely to be hardest hit by the impacts of the climate emergency, and that's here in Ireland, but also globally. Women are excluded from the economy and work in unpaid caring or domestic roles, which impact their transport use, as I've mentioned, and their vulnerability to poverty, whether it's energy poverty, food poverty, transport injustice. Women face huge barriers in access to employment, key resources and public services, including housing and health. And women and children are disproportionately represented in deaths related to air pollution worldwide. Care and support work is vital and inherently low emissions work, and it must be considered key to our just transition. But at the moment, it's completely omitted from it. And so we're always calling for care work to be valued as green work. Marginalised women are particularly affected by the climate crisis. The intersectional nature of socioeconomic inequalities mean that many marginalised women and girls are affected in particular and different ways. So older women are more likely to live alone and in low quality housing. Women make up almost 85% of all one-parent families in the EU and in Ireland, with 45%, sorry to reiterate that, so women make up almost 85% of all one-parent families in the EU, and then in Ireland, 45% of lone parents, the majority women, living in forced deprivation and in private rented accommodation are the most affected by energy poverty. Disabled, traveller and Roma women face barriers in accessing employment. In Ireland, only 17% of traveller women and 34% of disabled women are in paid employment. And then access to affordable, high quality childcare is a huge issue for women and families across the world and in the island of Ireland. So these are some of the factors that really impact how women are affected by the climate crisis. So women's voices really need to be central, and those most impacted must be at the centre of the decision-making spaces as well. So just on to one of the last slides of my part. So why we take a feminist community work approach in this project and to climate justice. We're addressing and tackling the root causes of inequality and climate injustice. So we're looking for system change, not climate change. And you'll often hear that at demos here in Ireland and I'm sure elsewhere throughout the EU. A feminist community work approach cares, so it's championing, caring work that is paid and unpaid and calling for it to be appropriately valued and recognised as green work. And it's moving away from consultation into meaningful, non-tokenistic participation in decision-making spaces. And a feminist community work approach is about focusing on the issue of women's representation in decision making, as well as other marginalised groups. Those most impacted must be at the centre. And then it's about championing a collective focus. So we must fight for the many and not for the few. And it also means a feminist community work approach means a better public services, which benefit both people and the planet ultimately. So then just on to my final slide, which is on the Feminist Climate Justice Report. Again, I'll throw in a link to that in a moment. So back in April, we published our Feminist Climate Justice Report, which was carried out by the School of Applied Social Studies, some researchers from there at University College Cork, Ireland. And this is where we identified numerous policy and data gaps. So you'll see here we have just transition, care, energy poverty and housing, transport, health, food, land use, agriculture and biodiversity. And all of these sections in their own right could deserve a research paper and action. So we have some key asks on each of those. And again, I'll throw some links into the chat now, but I've ran out of time, but I'd really encourage you to come and look at that Feminist Climate Justice Report and get in touch with us as well. So at this point, I'm going to hand you back to Siobhan. And if you've any questions, pop them into the chat also. Thank you.
Thanks so much for that, Colette. That was really interesting to hear about and great work. So we're going to start the panel now with Belle, Kelsey, and Claire. So just to get started, I'll ask each of you to maybe give us a brief introduction about your work and what you do and what a feminist approach to justice means to you. So maybe we'll start off with Belle.
Yeah, sure. Hi, I'm Belle, I'm Lele. I'm from Dublin, Ireland. Just a bit about me. I'm like I'm an activist, but I'm like half an activist, half a student. I'm in my final year of school in Ireland, so I'm very like I don't know, it's kind of hard to split my time, but I think I definitely try to make it work. Um, so when I'm not in school, I'm an equality advocate and climate activist. So mo a lot of my work kind of revolves around like people in my community, which would be second level students. So like if a student comes to me with like a problem or an inequality that they're facing, like I don't know, something simple like lack of period products in the bathrooms or like maybe they're facing like racism in school or something like that would kind of be my job to like kind of guide them in way of like supports and guide them in way of reporting and things like that. Um, I'm also very like when I, sorry, I can't find my words. When I'm not protesting or kind of like interacting with other students, I'm also advocate a lot for like mental health supports and particularly my latest project I guess was on eco anxiety and like sort of like kind of more supports for eco anxiety for young people because I feel as though people don't really realize how much the climate crisis affects us just because we learn a lot about it in school, and obviously it's going to affect my generation the most. Obviously, all of us, but like, you know. Um, and sorry, can you repeat the last part of the question? I feel like I'm just missing a bit.
Don't worry. It was, what does climate justice mean to you?
What does climate justice mean to me? It's such an open-ended question.
It's a big
Um,
question.
I guess to me, climate justice just means like consulting everyone in like when addressing climate justice, because climate justice is just so like intersectional and like so many people are so like vulnerable to it. Um, I guess that like women, particularly in the global south where I would be originally from, are obviously disproportionately affected to climate change, but that's due to like roles in like agriculture and caregiving and resource management, etc. And like just because of the way that society is structured, women don't really have like well, you kind of know this already, but women don't have as much of a say in kind of decisions as men do, which is a little annoying. Um, but sorry, I feel like I'm going over time, but just to sum up, I guess climate justice to me just means consulting everyone in the world, just because everyone is affected by climate justice, even though it's not feasible to consult everyone. That's what it means to me.
But trying to reach that. No, that's super interesting. And Claire, I'll ask you next a brief intro to yourself and what climate justice means to you.
Yeah. Hi everyone, I'm delighted to be here. My name is Claire Kenny and I'm Policy Assistant with Independent Living Movement Ireland, ILMI. ILMI is a national cross-impairment disabled persons organisation as defined under the United Nations Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, UNCRPD. ILMI has many young disabled members. We have a youth collective space for disabled people aged 16 to 30. The youth collective allows young people to connect with like-minded peers. It is also a space to discuss issues that affect young disabled people and how we can remove disabling barriers. Central to the way we work is to ensure that policy decisions that impact the lives of disabled people are directly influenced by those whose lives are directly affected. Our vision is an Ireland where disabled people have liberty and self-determination over all aspects of their lives to participate fully in an inclusive society as equals. We in ILMI recognise that change, climate change is necessary to reduce our carbon emissions. However, there is an urgent need to engage with disabled persons organisations to ensure that any public investment is fully inclusive and ensures that exchequer funds are designed to meet the needs of everyone. A feminist approach to climate justice means it's about making rights real and achieving equal distribution of resources to everyone. Thank you.
That sounds great, Claire, and the work that you do is really good. So, and Kelsey, last but not least, a quick intro and what climate justice means to you.
Hello everyone, my name is Kelsey and I am a youth worker. I have been for the last 6 years and at the minute I work for Belong To. So I work with young people ages 14 to 23 on a weekly basis. And a feminist climate justice approach to me is I'll keep it short. I know we're time. But for me, it's giving young women, in a nutshell, the tools to be like for me, the most passionate thing I am about right now is giving young women the tools to be able to be in spaces, places where decisions are being made, and for them to be able to be in those spaces to make sure that their voices are heard. Um, so yeah, I think that one is really important right now.
Great. Okay, so first question, I'm gonna put it to Belle. So Belle, you told us you carry out climate actions within the secondary school level of education in Ireland. And for any students in the room, maybe could you briefly discuss your experiences with action within these second level settings and maybe any challenges you faced or opportunities?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess students kind of have the opportunity to, kind of carry out eco-based activities kind of in both in school and outside of school. So in school, it's a lot of like posters, a lot of awareness campaigns, a lot of eco clubs like Green Schools Committee and things, a lot of like kind of internal advocating in the sense that like we can raise money for climate-based organizations like Eco UNESCO, which is an organization in Ireland. We can like take part in kind of like educational programs to then kind of raise awareness in thing in sort of like sustainable actions, I guess. And we can kind of like set up school-wide initiatives like recycling programs and reducing energy uses by simple things like turning off the lights or just making sure that the taps don't run over things, and obviously encouraging sustainable transport like taking the bus or walking or carpooling, and partnering with like local organizations to like every year my green schools organizes a like partnership with a local charity shop just so that we can like kind of sell charity secondhand clothes within the school without it like kind of promoting sustainability in like a hidden way, I guess, because we don't actually tell them that they're secondhand clothes. We just kind of sell them. Um, and like I guess just to address like how we kind of carry it out outside of school, I guess like when we learn like kind of how to live sustainably, like we do take that home. Obviously, like it's like when I did my first sustainable program, it was 6 weeks I think with Eco UNESCO, but I did it like through my school, and obviously I took like learnings away from that. Like now I wash my hands by clothes every single week. It's a trek, but like it's worth it. But then just like little things like I also learned about that like kind of I feel like I gained like leadership skills by like joining my green schools and joining my kind of everything and kind of just carrying out all these different initiatives in schools. And obviously, I kind of got more in touch with my community by just engaging with my community and kind of carrying out these initiatives. But then again, also outside of school, students do have the opportunity, like I'm sure we've all heard of Fridays for Future, and students do have the opportunity to strike on a Friday outside of school. It can be challenging. I'm going to use myself as an example. So I'm in sixth year, which is my last year, which is sort of an important year. And it's hard to like miss school every Friday, even if it is for a great cause. Like sometimes your school can kind of act as a barrier to you as for to like carry out your goals essentially, I guess. There's also just some some schools and some staff members just don't kind of prioritize climate action. They kind of just, especially I feel in Ireland, but it might just be me, but I feel like I don't know, it's always, I'm sure you've all kind of heard about the points race, like it's always all about the points. There's not really any time for anything else, which is a little annoying, but it's fine. And then there's also kind of the challenge of not being taken seriously enough just because we're students, because second level students can be between the ages of 11 and 19. So I started my climate activism when I was 14, 15-ish. I was in transition year, and it can be really hard to just be taken seriously, like even by the people in your own school, which is a little frustrating, but it's fine. Um, like obviously, like even despite the challenges, like student driven, I still think that student driven eco-based activities are kind of essential for school, just because like at the end of the day we are the leaders of our school, so it makes the most sense because we're essential to the school structure, whatever. So it does like I do think that students and young people sort of taking charge of their own sustainable actions is essential to school life.
Mhm. So even though there's challenges there of striking a balance between academics and elsewhere, it's always worth it. That's what I'm hearing. Anyway, thank you for that, Belle. Claire, next. So, disabled people are shamefully absent from so much climate policy and decision making, both here in Ireland and abroad. So, why is it so important for young people, young disabled people, to get involved in climate action?
Yeah, climate change is it is a divisive challenge facing all of humanity in the whole. Um, it does not discriminate. It does not pick and choose whom to affect. It is important that young disabled people get involved in climate action. As they have an awful lot to contribute. Their expertise of lived experience and their intersectionality. Like we're not only disabled people, we're disabled women, we're sisters, we're mothers, we're well not in this context because we're young disabled people. But we have many intersectionalities, and I suppose it's one being disabled is one intersectionality that anyone can become a part of at any time. Um, Including young disabled people in the conversation will ensure that climate action does not have unintended negative consequences on our lives. Any climate action taken would be inclusive in design and meet the needs of everyone if disabled people were involved. Because I suppose when you're thinking about inclusion and inclusivity, if you haven't the lived experience of facing the disabled barriers yourself, you don't actually know by um taking doing something that's actually disabling to another group of people. So it's always nice to have that kind of narrative or dynamic as part of the conversation. And young disabled people must be a part of the transformative effect for our shared future. So that's me.
That's great, Claire. Thank you. And just to pause and let you know if you have any questions for our panelists, please pop them into the chat and we'll get to them. Next I have a question for Kelsey. So Kelsey, youth work has had a rich history of climate justice work in Ireland. What makes a youth work approach unique, do you think? And how can young people get involved?
I think youth work has a unique approach because youth work is a space where young people come on voluntary participation basis, so they're not made to be there. Um, it's also a space where we try and work on their personal and social development, and we kind of would try and get them to think critically about the world around them. So how that's different really is other spaces they're in. They're usually given information and then they're expected to, give that information back in various forms of testing. When I say that, it's just like, I mean, in schools, like they're there for a specific reason sometimes, and that's probably why teachers can't spend a lot of time doing this work, even though they should. But with youth work, for myself anyway, I have the opportunity to spend as much time as I need to or I want to, or as much time as they want to, talking about climate justice. And there's no pressure for them to have all the answers. There's no pressure for me to have all the answers, but we can figure it out together. And that's one thing I think is a real benefit to youth work, and it's probably why there's been a rich history of it in youth work. And I've done like lots of workshops with young people, over the summer, particularly around climate justice. And I've had conversations with young people about moving into a sustainable world. And one thing that really strikes them is when I talk about how we can't like we shouldn't just copy and paste, as in go, right, the world we have now, let's make it sustainable. But we need to build on what we have and also include young women, young people with disabilities, young LGBT people. And I have young people in groups that would have various different identities, various intersectionality analities of identities. Um, and then that's when we get into doing all that kind of work. So for me, that's the real beauty of youth work.
That's great, Kelsey. That really sounds like a great medium for the activism. And how can young people get involved in youth work?
Um, well, for the youth work this like belong to for now, we have a website belongto.org, but in general, youth work, I suppose a lot of communities have a youth centre, a lot don't. So it just depends on how far away our local youth club is, our youth centre. But um usually youth work is 10 to 23. Now I'm 14 to 23, but 10 to 23, and you can go have a chat with youth workers. Um and I suppose youth workers come in and they ask young people what they want. And if you're really passionate about climate justice or, feminine climate justice in particular, or anything that's like that, and you want to explore that, and you might not have the opportunity to do that in school, if you can find a youth club that's close to you that you're able to access, um, it'd be very, very good for that. And you can spend 3 weeks doing it, you could spend 10 weeks doing it, you could spend 18 months doing it. It's really, that's how, for me anyway, when people get involved in youth work.
Great. Thanks, Kelsey. So we have an anonymous question in that I'll put to the panel. So what would the panelists each like to see the Irish government and the EU do to affect a change that is feminist and climate just? So, maybe does anyone want to hop in first on that, or will I can put it to Belle first, maybe?
Sorry, can you repeat the question one more time? I think you're on mute. Sorry.
Thank you. I was on mute. So what would the panelists each like to see the Irish government and the European Union do to affect change that is feminist and climate just?
Hmm. Wow, that's a loaded question. Um, I guess, well, obviously there's like tons of things it could do, but I guess for me, um, oh, she put it in chat, thank you. For me, I think expanding renewable energy resources would be a big one and expanding renewable infrastructure, but that's also just because that's what I would know a lot about just because I'm in secondary school and that's just what we learn about. Um, so I guess just investing in like wind and solar and hydroelectric power and kind of to phase out fossil fuels. Um, and that's some like I know that there's been a lot of like trees and a lot of bills passed through both Ireland and the EU, but they're just not quick enough, in my opinion. Like they're just not like, 2030 is 5.5-ish years away. Not even 5.5, like 5 in a month. It's 2025 already. And I just think that I don't know. And no, like obviously Ireland's a very like sort of country place, if that makes sense. Like, I think
Very
if
rural.
yeah, exactly. That's what I'm trying to say. Sorry. Very rural place. So even just investing in sustainable farming practices, investing in kind of um, what's the word? Diversification, sorry, land use diversification, like kind of bioenergy crops and to kind of just different initiatives to kind of just promote sustainable action, I guess. But again, that's just my like sort of school-based um thought process because that's just what we do in school. But I don't obviously I'm sure there's more and better things to be done.
Well, that's a good answer. I'll put it to Claire next.
Yeah. Um, so I what I would say is that to include all intersectionalities when you're coming up with climate initiatives, um, consult with disabled persons organizations, consult with other minority uh other minority groups before you kind of launch or put forward a climate policy, because if you put forward a climate policy too quick without including everyone in the consultation, or even better, the co-creation process, um, there's little intricacies that will be left out, and it could lead to not a, a, a percentage of the population not being included or have less access to the community. So that's what I'd say.
That's great. Yeah, so like widening the gaps rather than closing
Mm.
them, I suppose. And Kelsey, I'll put it to you next.
Um, I suppose echoing what Belle and Claire just said, but also I think, and I don't know if you'd say raising awareness or, but like for me, one thing young people and especially young women have been really interested in talking about and really passionate about trying to get people to know about is the fast fashion industry and how that affects so many different people when it's lots of like, different materials coming into Ireland being wasted, but then also people who are making them, like the labor, it's not very ethical. But then like you have people who can't afford to go out and maybe buy stuff that is sustainable, or having companies who retail companies who have a sustainable collection. And how sustainable is that collection? Why would you have a sustainable collection? And why would you not just have sustainable clothing? So I think because that's what all young people, and from my experience right now, young people are buying lots of clothes very cheaply and sometimes because they don't have any other option. So I think that's another thing that the government in Ireland could look at, other than what Claire and Belle has just said.
Yeah, and fast fashion is a really interesting one as well
Mm.
because it's for the majority it's young women are being marketed
Yeah,
to, and then when you look further up the chain it's young women working
and it creates
in
so
these
much,
factories.
yeah. Like there's
And
so much in that.
Yeah, it's a real intersectional one, definitely. So we have another question here, from Teresa. So how do you deal, I suppose, with students who are not interested in climate change for whatever reason? So how do you bring people, young people, and students along that there's they're not interested in climate justice, I suppose. Any words of advice there, folks?
I don't know if it's different for others. For me, I try to engage what young people might be interested in other than climate change. And one of the big successful things I did in the summer was I realized that one of our Dublin's local football teams, Bows have a sustainability team, and their new stadium that is going to be built is going to be incorporating of sustainability. Um, and they're working with teams on that. So what I did was I had a group of young people who were interested in sports, not necessarily interested in climate justice. And when I brought them to the stadium, I asked about their climate team and I was asking questions. And then they were like, "But why? Why would you make a stadium? What's that to do with football or whatever?" And then they talked about how much it would impact the environment if they weren't selling, I don't know, 15,000 cups every week that were all plastic. Um, and even for me, finding out they had a climate and sustainability team, I was like, wow. So I think the best thing is if you cannot get young people interested in climate, try and get something else that they're interested in that will incorporate climate. Because for me, I think a lot of stuff you can relate back to climate and sustainability, and it's just trying to link that together.
Kelsey, that's really good advice, very interesting. Yeah, because um as I've heard from Colette before, all policy is climate policy, so everything touches it. So yeah, if you can bring them along on something else. Yeah, no, that's really cool. Claire, Bell, any inputs?
Yeah, climate policy intersects with all policy, and it mightn't be exactly obvious to start how it affects people, but it will affect people eventually. So see what the, the young people are interested and the disabled young people in that are interested in, and then maybe link it back to policy. I know that with the sustainable development goals, um, you know, it has a poverty aspect to it, it has an education aspect to it, it has a gender equality aspect to it, but it also has a strong um climate policy aspect to it. So maybe they mightn't be interested necessarily in the policy part or in the climate part to begin with, but then when you link it back to other sections that might affect them, they'll be like, oh yeah, and we could extend it to this. So yeah.
Yeah, exactly, because sustainability is it's about social sustainability as well, so definitely. Um, what was I gonna say? And then, Belle, do you have anything for that question?
Yeah, well, firstly, just want to echo what Kelsey and Claire said. Of course, like as a young person, it's always so like it's awesome just when the youth worker kind of try to like empathize with us instead of kind of just talking at us. So I think that's great. But also just in terms of like engaging young people with climate justice, I think that like I don't know, I was having this debate with my politics teacher over the budget and how basically the Irish government I felt that it was insulting that the Irish government hadn't consulted young people when making the budget because it would affect us more kind of in future years. And she was kind of saying how if someone had tried to explain the budget to us that it would just go over our heads because we didn't understand enough when we were kind of too young and stuff. And well, I can understand that a little bit in the sense that like yes, it might go over my head because I'm not like a trained expert or whatever, but I think that like I don't know. I'm sorry, I'm just trying to equate this to climate justice in the sense that, like, yes, I'm not a scientist, I'm not like trained or like as educated maybe as other people that might be older than me, but I don't think that like just because you don't have as much life experience as someone else that you should kind of be left out of the conversation. Like you should still sort of be consulted. And I think that just to answer the question, I think that the way to engage young people is to actually include them in the conversation. Like, don't just be like, "Oh, we're going to teach you about climate justice." Then, at the end of your course or at the end of your, obviously, yes, it's important to know all these facts and figures and things, but like at the end of your course or your program or your whatever, you should sort of be pushing them towards the direction of this is how you can make an impact with the knowledge that you've now gained. Like, it shouldn't just be a case of, oh, you're going to go to this course for 16 weeks or 18 or however long it is. It should be, oh, you've learned this, so now this is how you can kind of act on it. Like, you should kind of be learning the tools to kind of, make an impact and make a difference on, like, what you've just learned, if that makes any sense. And I just think that it's not like, as I said before, it's not really a fair excuse to be like, oh, you won't understand this, so you shouldn't like be involved in it. Like if you, I don't understand high level maths, but I'm still doing it.
Yes, so um, facing a lot of ageism in being listened to as a young person. And thanks for that, Belle. And we actually have another question for you from Carrie. And Carrie asks, Belle, from your experience, is there a desire from school management um to support initiatives around climate issues?
So in my experience, it's very varied. Like when I kind of first approached my school about, oh, I need to take Friday off because I'm going to a strike or I'm going to a protest or whatever, um, they would say no. Like even if I had my parents' permission, they would say no, just because, as I said before, schools can be very kind of academically driven. They're very, like it's like a points race, and the school looks better if you're, excuse me, sorry, the school looks better if like the students are doing well, obviously, because like, oh, we're good teachers. Look, one of our, listen, 8 of our students got over 600 points, and it's very like showing off it, I guess. But then when you sort of like, I started going to, I remember I went to my second Fridays Future March, maybe, or maybe it was my third. I don't know. But I went to my second or third one, and I was in the Irish Independent for this article that I did, and then suddenly it's like, oh my God, this student from this school in Dublin was in the Irish Independent, and they started kind of showing off and kind of bragging on social media that like one of their students was like working so hard to, kind of fight for climate justice. But however, that was like I went without my school's permission. Like it wasn't like they did not support me initially. It was only when I kind of got attention for the people and they're like, oh, we're so good. We're such an eco-friendly school. Like it was only sort of like once they knew it would get them attention, I guess. Like I don't know why schools are in such a popularity race that is like when they're not in, yes, they're a school, but they're not like I don't know why they care. But I just so just to answer the question, I guess it's very like varied. It's very like sometimes they can be supportive, but kind of if they're getting something out of it, I guess. But again, that's just my experience. Like some people might have complete opposite experience to me.
So showing how it can benefit the school as well could help overcome some of them challenges you're facing. Thanks for that, Belle. I have a question here from Aoife. So, are there any particular climate successes, um, climate justice successes or advancements that you were involved with, that you're really proud of or that people could replicate elsewhere that you would like to share?
I have a I would call it a success. It might seem really small, but I was bringing a young person on the climate protests in the summer, obviously, because the school wouldn't let them go during school year. Um, but what happened was we went and they met it was like the deputy leader of the Green Party at the time, and when we finished from that, they were like, okay, I want to go into politics now at school and I want to do it because I want to make a change for climate. And for me, that was a big win because although it seems like it was one interaction, but if they do that, they go, because that's something now that they're really passionate about doing, that hopefully that will shape the way the future of climate justice or climate policy is. So yeah, for me, that was a huge win.
That's so lovely. Yeah, no, that's a really nice anecdote. Yeah, because sometimes it's just in little moments that trigger um, I suppose what you need to keep going with your climate activism. Um, as well. Would anyone else like to jump in and tell us something that they're proud of?
Yeah, well, it's kind of like a group effort, but Isle and I were involved in the high level political forum. It's the STG forum over in the UN. So that was a big achievement as part of Coalition 2030. Um, one of our staff members at the time presented at that, and was able to amplify the disabled person's voice and what climate change meant to us. So, yeah.
Wow, Claire, that's really impressive. Um, well done to yourself and everyone at LMI. Um, and then I might just ask you, what do we see? Do we have another question coming in? Bear with me. No, I want to put this next question to all the panelists. So, one piece of advice that you could give the audience as you begin on your climate active journey or you continue it, is there any key piece of advice you would give to someone today to take away with them?
Um, climate climate change and environmentalism is as much about social justice as it is about correcting the damage we've done to our planet. And I suppose in that sense, therefore, it is essential that as many perspectives are there as possible. Always consider the perspective that is not sitting at the table and include them. This creates for better policy, but it also creates for better outcomes for the people it affects and a healthier and happier society in general. So that's the one piece of advice I would offer.
That's great, Claire. Thanks. Maybe I'll put it to Kelsey next.
I suppose for me is to we're striving to build a better sustainable world, but for me it's not just to copy and paste what we have. So don't just go, okay, let's just get electric cars instead of normal cars. But you know, all of the things that come with electric cars, the engineering and all of that, that makes sure everybody has access to those jobs even, or, just making sure that we're not copy and pasting what we already have, that we're reaching out to marginalized groups, we're making sure everybody's voice is heard, and we're making sure everybody has the opportunity to understand or know what climate justice is. And yeah, it's all about social justice and ensuring that everybody is included.
Exactly. We can't expect the same system that produced the problems to fix them. We need to really, yeah, not do a copy and paste, as you said. That's great, Kelsey. What about yourself, Belle?
Well, first of all, just to echo what the other panelists were saying, like unity is definitely the key to overcoming, so absolutely. And then just like again, in my own personal experience as an activist, I would tell other activists to kind of prioritize yourself in the sense that it can get very like you can go to all the consultations, you can go to all the protests, you can do absolutely everything right, and change still won't come, or it still won't come like as quick as you might want it to, I guess. And I just think that like it can kind of feel like it's all your fault and that like you failed and that like you're not like you're doing something wrong when really you're doing everything right and it's just that the system's kind of working against you. So I would say just that like the more you learn about things, the more it kind of becomes reality. Like I was always told, like in school from the time since I was like, I started school when I was like 4, and I was always told that like, oh, we're running out of clean water, or that like, oh, the planet's heating up and we're all gonna die. But like, it was kind of just like a game then. Like you were very young, but then you kind of start learning about the science behind it, and you kind of start learning about like the effects and like, oh, wow, this is actually gonna happen. This is actually gonna affect me. So I just say, don't let it like get to you too much. Like you can like do all the sustainable things, you can take all the sustainable initiatives, but at the end of the day, you are one person. Like you are making just one impact. Like the system needs to change. It's not all on you. So I would tell all other activists to just, you know, focus on yourself. Just like yes, it's a part of a movement, but like you're also you. So yeah.
That's great advice, Belle. And yeah, definitely, because if you don't look after yourself and end up burnt out, you can't help anyone either. So definitely, I would really agree with that. So guys, is there, unless anybody has any last comments that they still want to share, or nope, all good. Um, then maybe we'll wrap up. So thanks so much to the contributors, Claire, Kelsey, Belle, and Colette. It was great to hear from you all. Um, and we'd also like to thank Ega for the opportunity to have this webinar today and to reach beyond Ireland and on a European platform. So we hope that you'll join us in the campaign for feminist climate justice and gender equality in your own capacity, spaces, workplaces, and other, and where there are young voices and where the feminist voices. So please and ask where are young voices and ask where feminist voices. So please keep in touch with us via the National Women's Council's mailing list. So you can see the QR code, and there's a link to sign up to the chat. And also, Colette has been great at sticking some links in to do with everyone's work here today. So be sure to have a look at the chat so you can scan the QR code or sign up to the link. Also, we'd ask you to sign up to the Feminist Communities for Climate Justice mailing list also. So we have the QR code there, and there's a link in the chat as well. And it even though it's an Irish project, if you're from beyond Ireland, please join. And thank you to our panelists again. So really interesting and thought-provoking contributions. We hope you've all taken away something today and been inspired to take action and demand climate justice in your school, higher and further education at local, national, EU levels, in your work, online, in your community and beyond. So thanks again to Ega for the opportunity to be part of the Gender Equality Forum and for their support in hosting us. Thanks so much, folks. And if you have any other questions, be sure to be in contact with us and we'll put people in touch. Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Siobhan.
No, my pleasure.